Rana Gujral from Behavioral Signals. Super excited to be welcoming him here. He's going to be one of our Voicefluencers next week on The Voice Den. That'll be March 24th at 5 p.m. Pacific. And today, right now here, live, we have a chance to get to know Rana a little bit. And so without any further ado, let's bring on Rana and my co-host, Ian Utile. Here we are, gentlemen. How are you doing, Rana?
Doing fantastic, Teri. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Hey, Ian, good to see you.
It's good to be here. Happy Wednesday, everybody.
Happy Wednesday.
All right. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. 1 week away from the Voice Den. Super excited to have you as part of that, Rana. We'd love to learn a little bit about you today. Awesome. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know. Rana, why don't we just start off with a little bit of an introduction. For those that don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of your background and what your story is?
My story, wow. My story has been around sort of tinkering with product and technologies, and later on that tinkering sort of, I guess graduated into tinkering with companies. So I've been building products, and I've had this amazing set of opportunities to have been involved in this iconic product journeys. Early part of my years were mostly focused on sort of doing that in corporate setups, and I had this amazing opportunity to go build this time and attendance device back in the day at Kronos, which was a mega success. Then was part of the Google TV journey, which was the precursor of the Chrome Stick. Had an amazing opportunity to do a private equity backed turnaround, which was quite an experience. Did a startup that got acquired in 2016. And then most recently with Behavioral Signals, we're building this incredible tech that I believe is the missing piece in taking our conversations to the next level. So we'll talk about that as well.
Well, I mean, you set yourself up for that question. So let's hear a little more about that. Go ahead. We'd love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, so I think our core focus right now is in deducing intelligent and actionable insights from the tone of voice. And as you know, human communication is a very complex process, and it depends not only just on the words being spoken, but also how they're expressed. And that's what we focus on. We focus on the how part, and from the how, which is the acoustic cues, intonations, and other interaction signals, we unravel a variety of signals, emotion signals, behavioral signals, and also go as far as sort of, unraveling intent signals. For example, what action will the participant in my conversation will undertake in the near future? If it's a client, will the client buy or not buy? If it's someone who has to sort of pay debt or restructure a loan, will they do that or not, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what we do. I mean, we're really sort of, building this incredible technology that is focused on the acoustics of the conversation, the pitch and tonal variance, prosody. And from that, we're unraveling a variety of these signals that can then be applied into many industry use cases.
Yeah, I love that. I'm absolutely fascinated by this area. As you know, Rana, we've been in some rooms together on Clubhouse and talking about vocal biomarkers and all that kind of stuff. It's an absolutely fascinating area.
Yeah.
I'd love to get Ian in here as well, though, and just I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But Ian, thoughts, questions for Rana?
It's great to spend time with you. And it's been fun to jump
Likewise.
on. But we've always heard each other's voice and then see avatars. It's definitely different to be face to face. If you see my eyes over here, I'm just sharing our live videos everywhere, but I'm still listening to the conversation. I have a question for you around the future.
Yeah.
Where are you most comfortable talking about the future? Like if you could choose to talk about 3 months out, 6 months out, like the end of this year, or if you could choose to talk about the end of this decade, or do you ever fantasize about where conversational AI, neural language processing, artificial intelligence could be at for the following generations, like for your grandkids and their grandkids? So when it comes to vision casting for the future, where do you find yourself most comfortable?
I mean, this is a fantastic question. It's the first time someone's asked me that question. But it's original. I have to give you that. And I feel that we have to look a little bit further ahead. We must, especially kind of where we stand right now in terms of the technology landscape in general, sort of like, a global landscape. Yeah, I mean, certainly what's happening in the next 3 months and 6 months and the next few years is relevant because those are the opportunities you're going to go after. And so from an entrepreneurial standpoint, even from a technology standpoint, you got to keep an eye on that. But you got to look a little bit further ahead. You got to look at least a decade or so out, even much further out from that, because things are changing very, very fast. And in order to really do anything impactful, you got to have a longer view. And I mean, artificial intelligence and other dynamics around technology, including aspects of conversational AI, are going to be incredibly impactful, and both, in a positive way, but also if not done right, there's going to be other potential negative impacts, which we have to sort of factor in now and start to build some capabilities to mitigate on now, especially on the side of AI. And so I feel that that's what we need to do, and especially, look, I mean, folks like yourself, I mean, who are influencers or technologists, and also, other entrepreneurs who are building out these companies. And Teri, who's like, from the medicine space, as a physician, it's our responsibility to sort of lead out and sort of provide a view of sort of like where things are going to be at. And if you look at, by the way, if you look at the last decade, how fast that went by. And where were we a decade ago in terms of, you take a handful of these technologies. Let's take NLP and NLU. Let's pick on those two. And where was NLP and NLU in 10 years ago? And that will give you a bench of sort of like, wow. I mean, that is amazing progression. And could we have predicted that? Yes, absolutely, and we did. And even though back in the day the belief system wasn't as strong, and I think that is changing. I mean, aside from not just like, people are sort of looking at it and say, yeah, I mean, those points of inflection that we've talked about, we're here. And now if you look at the angle and the delta of sort of like, the curve, you believe it, which is, it's pretty sharp. And so the next 10 years, it's going to be right here. And it's gonna not feel like 10 years. It's gonna be like, it just happened right away. So that's my perspective.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
So I'll just give you an example, and then you can kind of walk me through your thought process, because I appreciate your answer. And so this is the scenario that comes to my head, like an ideal scenario. You're sitting down with the entire board, the CEO, all the chiefs, the whole entire decision-making team at one of the top 3 largest financial institutions in the world. And so here you are, they're all looking at you. You're the expert in what you're doing with behavioral signals around fintech. And they say, we trust you. We've been watching you. We've been watching behavioral signals. We think that you're our guy. So here's our proposal. We'd like to make a commitment to have you and your team, whether it's your existing team or you bring in outside contractors, we want you to lead this. We want you and your team to take a year to lay out a strategy of what we're going to do as a financial institution by 2030. And we're going to give you 2 budgets. We're going to give you one budget for this year for strategy, and we're going to commit to another budget for the following 9 years to execute on that strategy. Our total budget is $100 million. Mm-hmm. Now you have to decide how much energy, money, time do you invest in the strategy in the first year, and how much energy, money, and time does your team invest in the following 9 years to execute on that strategy? I'm very, very interested in your answer.
This is such a good question. Oh, Ian. Oh, man. All right, Rana.
Yeah, I mean,
good luck.
I mean, I'll tell you, it is first off, it is a very interesting and incredible question, and also a very relevant question. Surprisingly, I mean, we've been thinking about those things internally. We've been like sort of talking about sort of like, if you are the CEO and you are looking that far ahead, what are the different things that you need to start to plan for and look for, and even sort of like have a view out for. And if you look at the financial sector, I mean, the amount of changes, I mean, you just look at, the basic essential aspects of non-performing loans, right? I mean, during the 2009 financial crisis, NPLs doubled from the pre-crisis level. And the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown these levels into staggering heights. I mean, by the end of 2020, the US had almost 127 billion, up from the 95 billion in 2019. And Europe was battling a 401 billion euro wave in the red loans. And so where we're at now and where we're sort of looking ahead, I mean, entering 2021, this is representing to be a significant strain. And at the same time, the methodologies, the technology, the sort of like the general insight in terms of how to react to this, including how to react to the client base, especially in the financial sector, is incredibly inefficient and very out of date, and largely driven by human operators and analysis, which are very flawed in many different ways. So I think there is this sort of initial aspect of how am I going to continue to stay relevant? I got to do these things today. I mean, to continue to function as a bank. I mean, I need to sort of think about my current methods of debt collection and the inefficient and largely driven sort of processes that I have, and how do I leverage some of these technologies that can help me stay solvent. But then the larger picture, which is like, okay, with the rest of the tens of millions bucket, is going to be in terms of how I'm going to continue to build these relationships with my clientele, right? So what has happened, in fact, in the last, I'd say, half a decade or so, is there's this been intense push towards digitization, largely driven by this goal towards mitigating the touch points and also minimizing costs, and that's come back to bite some of these people, right? So now you have these neobanks, which actually don't even have a branch. I mean, there's no branch. I mean, it's just a phone app. And you have these clients that you've never met. There's no face-to-face interaction. And it has become a very, very transactional relationship. But you're spending a lot of time in building your brand. You're spending a lot of time in sort of building this sort of initial rapport and an aspect of trust. And but there's really no meat and potatoes. You don't really have the tangible way. I mean, when you digitize it, when you make it seamless, it's good. I mean, it also minimizes costs, but you're replaceable. It's very easy for me to go away from Robinhood today to another brokerage just because I don't like what you've done. There's no relationship, there's no loyalty, and it goes both ways. And I think what you're going to see is in that new realm of digitization, you're going to have to start to think about, well, how are you going to build trust, and how are you going to continue to sort of use capabilities that allow you to preserve the trust that you've built when things go off course. Like, I mean, especially sort of like now we're looking at Europe, $500 billion in, in the red loans or non-performing loans, €500 billion. When you have to do something about it, but when you go out and engage with those clients, I mean, can you do it in a meaningful way? Could you do it in a manner that allow you to still have a semblance of a relationship after you've had those conversations? Or is it going to be, that relationship ends right there because you did not manage it properly? You have no tools to sort of understand, the state of the mind of the client, or have, proper ways of, solving some of those problems. And I think that's where that money is going to be spent, which is it's still going to be the first bucket, still going to be in the aspects of, being able to function in this era of digitization. So using tools that allow you to be functionally remote and, in a distributed fashion, allow you to manage data. But the rest of the money bucket, if I'm, properly answering your question, is all going to be around in managing experiences and relationships and in building trust. And if you don't, you could build a company that ramps up really good, has multi-billion dollars in valuations, and then disappears. And we would see that. I mean, I predict this, that in the next decade, you would have multi-billion dollar companies disappear overnight. That's a trend which we haven't seen before. I mean, companies don't disappear overnight. You would see those because they also appeared from nowhere. And I mean, they grew up that fast, and there's no basis of that. Yeah, and I think that's the decade. This is the decade for that, and you'd see that those valuations sort of evaporating unless you have something else most tangible around empathy, around relationships, around trust. And financial sector is no different. So I think that's what they got to focus on. Everybody's got to focus on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my unique questions. I appreciate your insight. Back to you, Teri.
So thanks, Ian. That's a great question. Fantastic question. Rana, I do want to be respectful of your time. So I just want to ask you one or two maybe shorter questions, if that's okay. One of them is just coming back to the core technology here with the vocal biomarkers and the inflection in the voice. Where do you see the best use of that particular technology in the financial sector? Like, how is that actually going to be used? What are the use cases for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the use cases in the financial sector and across the board in other sectors are all around, delivering the uber and the most optimal experience for your client engagements. And you're having these conversations, you're having these engagements and these touch points, and for the most part, these happen in a call center. Where either your client's calling in or you have to call your client for whatever reason. And that's really the touch point, typically the most tangible touch point between a corporation, between a business and a client is happening. And so you have to maximize, you have to optimize those interactions. And when you look at, conversational AI and emotion AI, that's what we're focused on. But there are three phases. Now I look at it in three different phases. The phase one is before the conversation actually happens. You got to do things there. Then there's a phase where during when the conversation is actually occurring. And the third is the conversation's ended and now you're trying to gather intelligent insights. And what you see is that for the most part, the industry focus has been in the third phase, which is conversations ended. Let me understand, how the conversation actually went. And typically that has been taking the audio, converting that into text using a speech-to-text engine, and then parsing the text for meaning. And that has served us well. I mean, I think we've come a long way in most of these conversational AI stacks. And now you're seeing some interesting solutions that are playing in the middle phase, which is, hey, how do I help during a live conversation? Can I guide the agent better? Can I predict some things? But one of the big opportunities we see as a company is in the first phase, which has largely been overlooked, which is, hey, you could do a lot of things to create value before an agent ever picks a phone up to call a client, or an agent answers the call from the customer who's calling in. And that's by using intelligent biomarkers to understand conversational rhythms and getting the right people in front of each other, right? So, what we believe is that there are no good clients or bad clients. And also, there are no good agents or bad agents, which is a very commonly perceived thing in the industry, that there are certain agents that are good, certain that are bad in terms of performance. What we believe is that when you're talking about conversations or any client interaction, they're just good matches and bad matches. That's it. So if you can make more good matches, you're going to get better business results. And we're looking to solve for that by focusing on these biomarkers and creating these conversational bioprints that you can, by keying off of previous interactions and focus on the acoustics of those interactions. And then when you do these efficient AI-based matchmaking, you see magical business outcomes, right? So we're seeing like revenue improvement from between 10 to 15%, which is staggering, just by getting the right people in front of each other. And so that's the opportunity, I believe, is the one I'm most excited about for the financial sector, for the banking industry, and specifically for the collection space, because that's a complicated space, especially when it comes to conversations.
Sure, that's great. Well, thanks for that. That sort of gives us a little bit of a concrete framework to see like where you're focusing, and that's very, very helpful. Rana, I want to thank you so much for being part of this. I'd love to ask you one final quick question and then give you an opportunity to share where people can catch up with you. We're thrilled that you're going to be joining us in the Voice Den next Wednesday. And some of the attendees are going to have the opportunity to ask you some questions. Some of what you've said already today is clearly, an area that you're passionate about. But if there were certain questions that you would love people to ask you, what is your sweet spot to speak about? What would that be? Like, what kind of topics would you love to be able to speak on and answer questions about?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of fun in general talking about sort of intersects of technology and the opportunity landscape, specifically related to AI and other deep learning technologies. I'd love to talk more about that. I'd also love to talk more about the general the experience landscape, and how the conversational AI is having an impact in that landscape. So I'd love to talk about that as well. I mean, I've had some amazing journeys in terms of building and scaling startups, and so I'd love to talk about that as well. I mean, if there's more inclination towards entrepreneurship or building companies, love to go there as well. All of those things are fun topics for me.
Wonderful. Well, thanks. We're so looking forward to that. Rana, this has been so great. Can you please take a moment and share with the listeners, with the viewers, everybody out there and all the various social media channels that we're on live right now, and people that will hear the recording, where can they go to connect with you, learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I mean, you can reach out to me on a variety of different social media platforms of your preference. LinkedIn works great, or the easiest is probably go to my webpage, ranagujral.com. There's a contact us form. Put out why you would like to talk and how should we interact. And I get an email. I usually always respond if it's actually clear in terms of what the agenda is. You will hear back from me, I guarantee you that, and would engage. And I think that's probably the best way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you, Ian, for joining us again. Thank you, Rana. Again, we are super, super excited to have Rana join us as one of the Voicefluencers in the Voice Den a week from today, a week from when this is going live, Wednesday, March 24th at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can get all the information you need at thevoiceden.com. It is completely free thanks to the generous sponsorship of Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant. And looking forward to having you there, Rana. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Likewise. Thank you.